Let's imagine for a moment the most powerful man on the planet, Emperor of Rome, master of millions of souls, conqueror of entire continents. Now imagine that same man, crushed, defeated, forced to beg for peace. By a woman whom history tried to erase, a woman who fought with only one eye. It's the year 25 BC. Jesus Christ, the environment, the borders between Egypt and Nubia. On one side, Emperor Augustus, lord of the known world. On the other, her. Her name was Amanirenas. She was a Kandake, a term that meant warrior queen. And she achieved something that no one had ever achieved before. She stopped Roman expansion in Africa forever. But the story you are about to hear, the one for today's audience, was buried for 2 millennia. Why? Because admitting that an African one-eyed woman had defeated the most powerful and formidable empire in history was unacceptable to anyone. If you are ready to discover how a one-eyed Nubian queen achieved the impossible, if you want to know how she literally terrified Rome and forced the empire to retreat, then stay here, because this story will revolutionize everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. To understand the magnitude of what Amanirenas accomplished, we must go back in time. We are talking about the 1st century BC. Jesus Christ. Rome is at its peak. Julius Caesar has just been assassinated, and now Augustus, the first emperor, is forging the greatest empire in history. But south of Egypt, in a region we know today as Sudan, there was a kingdom that Rome both respected and feared, the kingdom of Kush, also called Nubia. Listen carefully. While Europe was still emerging from primitivism, the Nubians already had a millennia-old civilization. They had pyramids, more than 200, larger than those in Egypt. They mastered iron metallurgy, while other peoples barely used bronze. They had a writing system, cities, and above all, Kandake women, who were not mere decorative queens but warrior commanders, absolute leaders who marched at the head of their armies. Amanirenas ascended the throne around 40 BC. Her husband, King Teretekes, had died, and now she ruled alone, a kingdom of over 1 million inhabitants. Here's a detail that makes this story even more fascinating. Amanirenas was one-eyed. The Greek historian Strabo described her as a woman of virile character, one-eyed, a battle scar she wore with pride. But in 30 BC, everything changed drastically. Octavian, who would soon become Augustus, conquered Egypt. Cleopatra was dead. Mark Antony defeated. And now, for the first time in history, Rome shared a direct border with Nubia. And you know how Rome worked, right? Conquest, expansion, absolute domination. They looked south and thought, another kingdom that will fall at our feet, and with a crippled queen at its head, it will be easy. They had no idea what awaited them. In 25 BC, Augustus appointed Gaius Petronius prefect of Egypt. Petronius was an experienced general, a veteran of multiple campaigns. His mission was clear: establish Roman authority on the southern frontier. The first provocation came when the Romans began taxing Nubian tribes with Nubian merchants in Syène, modern-day Aswan. It was a calculated humiliation. Rome was testing Amanirenas' limits. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when Petronius ordered statues of Augustus to be erected in border towns of Nubia. For the Romans, it was just political propaganda. For the Nubians, it was a declaration of war, because it is essential to understand something fundamental about Nubian culture. Their queens were considered divine. They were the embodiment of the goddess Isis on earth. Placing the statue of an emperor on Nubian territory was, in their eyes, spitting in the face of the gods. And Amanirenas was not the type of woman to swallow insults silently. A physical disadvantage for her was just another battle scar, proof of her courage. In 25 BC, she made a decision that would change history. She mobilized an army of 30,000 men, Nubian warriors. But that wasn't all. She decided to personally lead the troops. A 50-year-old, one-eyed queen with decades of military experience who knew exactly how Rome worked and how to defeat it. Her strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Attack first, hit hard, and strike where Rome least expected it. While the Romans were distracted by uprisings in Upper Egypt, Amanirenas advanced swiftly north. Her first target, Syène, the southernmost Roman city in Egypt. The Roman garrison was not enough to stop her. In a matter of hours, 30,000 Nubian warriors surrounded the city. The Romans tried to resist, but they were outnumbered and completely overwhelmed. The city fell in a single day. But what Amanirenas did next was a true masterpiece. She did not loot. She did not massacre the city or its people. Instead, she went straight to the statues of Augustus and destroyed them, all of them, one by one. But with the statue of the emperor himself, she did something no Roman general had ever dared. She decapitated it, tore Augustus's marble head off, and took it as a trophy to the Nubian capital, Meroe. Imagine the message that sent: the head of the most powerful man in the world trampled under the feet of warriors commanded by a one-eyed woman. It was a calculated humiliation that would echo throughout the Mediterranean basin. The news of Syène's fall reached Rome like lightning. Augustus was furious. How dare a barbarian, crippled woman challenge the empire? Petronius received direct orders to crush the rebellion, capture her alive, and restore Roman authority at any cost. Rome mobilized 3 full legions, about 15,000 men, cavalry, heavy infantry, siege engines. It was an overwhelming force against any conventional enemy. But Amanirenas was not a conventional enemy. As the Romans advanced south, she was always 3 steps ahead. She had withdrawn her main forces beyond the first cataract of the Nile, a rocky region where large Roman ships could not navigate. It was like fighting at home, with all the geographical advantages on her side. When Petronius finally reached the region, he encountered something entirely unexpected. She did not find an army waiting for her in the open field. What she found instead was a network of fortresses built in strategic positions, each defended by hundreds of warriors who knew every stone, every passage, every hiding place. And in command of all of this was a one-eyed queen who seemed to be everywhere at once. Amanirenas had transformed war into a series of bloody sieges. Every fortress the Romans attacked came at the cost of dozens of losses, and when they finally managed to take a position, they discovered that the Nubians had already retreated to the next line of defense. But Amanirenas' true genius lay in psychological warfare. She knew the Romans depended on supplies from the north. She knew that the longer they stayed in the Nubian desert, the more vulnerable they would become. And she knew one more thing. No Roman general wanted to be remembered as the man who lost 3 legions to a one-eyed African woman. Reports reached Rome of a ghostly queen appearing and disappearing like smoke. These warriors followed her blindly, inspired by a leader who had turned her disability into a symbol of strength. It was then that Petronius made the mistake that would define the entire war. Frustrated by the Nubian guerrilla tactics, he decided to launch a direct attack. The Roman legions advanced against the fortress of Napata, the ancient religious capital of Nubia. That was exactly what Amanirenas had been waiting for. Napata was not just a city, it was the spiritual heart of Nubia. It held the most sacred temples and the tombs of ancient kings. If Petronius succeeded in taking Napata, the war would be virtually won. But Amanirenas had other plans. She had spent months preparing the defense. Not only the soldiers, but the entire civilian population had been militarized. Men, women, even teenagers were trained in the bow and spear, and they possessed a secret weapon the Romans had not anticipated. Nubian archers were legendary. They could hit a target from 200 meters away. Their bows were made from special wood, flexible and powerful, far superior to anything Rome possessed. When the legions approached Napata, they were met with a rain of arrows unlike anything they had ever seen. But the worst was yet to come. Amanirenas had prepared a perfect trap. She simulated a retreat. The first Nubian lines fell back as if crushed by the Roman advance. Petronius, seeing an opportunity, ordered a massive attack. It was then that Amanirenas demonstrated why she was considered one of the greatest military strategists of antiquity. From 3 different sides, thousands of Nubian warriors emerged from hidden positions. The Romans found themselves surrounded, with the Nile blocking their retreat. It was a fight to the death, but Amanirenas did not command from afar like most leaders. She was on the front line, fighting alongside her warriors. Imagine the scene: a 50-year-old one-eyed queen fighting fiercely against the best soldiers in the world. Her presence on the battlefield was like a flash, instantly terrifying and inspiring. The Roman soldiers, used to facing men in combat, faced a woman who showed no fear. Worse yet, she was winning. The battle lasted hours. When the dust settled, hundreds of Romans were dead or wounded. Petronius was forced to retreat with what remained of his legions, but Amanirenas was not finished. she still had one final lesson to teach Rome. She did not chase the fleeing Romans. Instead, she did something far smarter. She sent ambassadors to Rome. The message was simple and devastating. Stop provoking us, or you will see what a one-eyed queen is capable of. Negotiations lasted months. Rome was in an impossible position. Continuing the war would mean admitting publicly that they could not defeat an African woman with a physical disability. Stopping the war would recognize that this very woman had achieved what no other leader ever had. Rome's backing wavered. Augustus faced a devastating political dilemma. The Roman Senate was divided. Some senators wanted to send more legions. Others argued that prolonging the war would be an economic and political disaster. But Augustus was an experienced politician. He knew that sometimes wisdom was knowing when to stop fighting. In 22 BC, 3 years after the war began, Augustus did something unprecedented in Roman history. He yielded to Amanirenas' demands. The Treaty of Samos, signed on the Greek island of Samos, officially recognized Nubia as an independent and sovereign nation. Rome renounced all territorial claims south of the First Cataract. The border between the two empires was now established forever. Even more impressively, Rome agreed to withdraw all its garrisons from the disputed region. It was a total victory for Amanirenas, while Petronius was transferred to another province, far from Africa. Rome wanted to quickly forget the humiliation of being defeated by a one-eyed queen. You may wonder, if this story is true, why have we never heard of it? The answer is simple, and at the same time unsettling. History is written by the victors, and when the victor is humiliated by someone he considers inferior, that story tends to disappear from the official records. Roman historians mentioned the Nubian War, but only superficially. They spoke of border troubles in the south that were resolved diplomatically. They never pointed out that an African woman with a physical disability had forced the most powerful empire in the world to retreat. Even worse, for centuries, Nubian civilization itself was deliberately ignored and minimized. When European explorers in the 19th century discovered the Nubian pyramids, they literally could not believe that sub-Saharan Africans had built them. They invented wild theories about foreign influences or lost races, anything rather than admit that Africa had produced one of the greatest civilizations of antiquity, and even more so, that an African woman with a disability had defeated Rome. It wasn't until the 20th century, with the advances of modern archaeology, that the truth became clearer. The story of Amanirenas began to emerge. In 1909, archaeologists discovered Meroe, the ancient capital of Nubia, and something extraordinary: the marble head of a Roman statue. It was the head of Augustus, the very same head Amanirenas had ripped from the ancient statue nearly 2,000 years earlier. It had been buried beneath the steps of a Nubian temple, literally trampled by generations of Nubians, exactly as Amanirenas had foreseen. This discovery confirmed that the story was not a legend but real, documented and archaeologically verified. The story of Amanirenas teaches us something fundamental about power, courage, and personal achievement. It shows us that empires do not always win. Sometimes, a determined individual can bend the most powerful system in the world. She reminds us that leadership knows no race, no gender, and no dependence on physical perfection. It only requires courage, intelligence, and the refusal to accept defeat. Amanirenas transformed what others might have considered a limitation into her greatest strength. Her lost eye became the symbol of a warrior who had survived everything and was ready for more. Amanirenas ruled Nubia for another 15 years after her victory over Rome. She died in peace, having preserved the independence of her people until the end of her days. Nubia remained independent for an additional 300 years, until it was conquered, not by Rome, but by the Aksumite kingdom of Ethiopia. Rome never attempted to reconquer Nubia. The lesson had been learned. Never underestimate a one-eyed queen. If this story moved you as much as it moved me while researching it, leave a like below. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing African stories you've never seen in history books. And tell me in the comments which other African queens or kings you'd like to discover, because Africa has thousands of epic stories waiting to be told.